This is John for Global Traveler. Today I'm on the beat with Dan Levy, Chicago radio personality extraordinaire. How are you, sir?
Hey, man, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, man. I know you're busy. You're a man of a thousand talents. You're everywhere in Chicago media, and I appreciate your time. So before we start,
on, man.
Well, I want to talk to you about podcasts. It's the main reason. But before I just get a little background on you.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're known for your voice. When did you know that you wanted to make a career out of your voice?
My voice used to actually be a pretty high-pitched voice until about almost my sophomore year of high school. And then all of a sudden it dropped. And it sounded like this. And I went to high school in Omaha, Nebraska. And when I went there, I mean, everybody, I graduated high school in 99. So that during that 95 to 99 period, you know, and living in Omaha, you can only really get certain jobs. So, I mean, I think minimum wage back then was like $7 an hour. You could either work, you know, fast food or work at a grocery store. But Omaha is the capital of telemarketing. So a lot of my friends, they were getting jobs at doing telemarketing. And it was like $13 an hour. So I was like, all right, there you go. There's my food and weed money for the weekend, you know, the typical high school guy. And so I decided to, you know, start doing that. And then, you know, it was outbound telemarketing, and I was selling credit cards to people in Compton, California. And I remember just going like, this job, you know, my buddies and I, we all got the job, and we were just messing around, and I got called in. I forgot that they were even listening to our calls, and my boss was in the background in the calling area. He goes, you know, hey, come back here. I want to talk to you. I'm like, right, you know, I guess I just lost this job. He goes, your voice, you ever thought about doing radio? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, your voice is so distinctive. There's so much personality to it. I've done radio, and I think that you have a future in it if you ever want to do radio, because your voice is there. And I was like, no one's ever told me. I never knew it. I have no idea. I never even thought about it. And so then when I was graduating high school, my parents were moving back to New York, and my brother was living in Chicago, and I had the choice of either going to New York with my parents, staying in Omaha and just doing nothing, or going to Chicago, where my brother said Columbia College is. And I was thinking about, I was like, you know what? He goes, you know, there's a broadcast school and you can get a degree. So I was like, all right, you know what? Let me try it out. If I like it, I like it. If not, I'll bolt somewhere else. And it's been 20 years since, and I'm still doing it.
Well, you're doing it well. You are all over the place on radio with voiceovers and with, you know, podcasts and your own stuff. You know, people might say, you know, you're blessed with a great voice, but I assume it's sort of like an athlete. You don't just wake up in the morning and you got the voice. Like, you probably have to do some sort of exercises or routines.
I don't know about exercises or routines, but I got to definitely take care of it. I mean, you definitely have to drink a lot of warm liquids with honey, or just try to steam it out. I try not to do any kind of voiceover without a hot shower first. And I've been buying these little tea tree oils and stuff and things you can kind of open up your senses, because it's so dry right now that when I wake up, I'm just like all plugged, and, you know, it doesn't come out right. I make sure I try to stretch, and I try to do things that are, you know, I try not to eat too much dairy. Dairy is a clogger, and it's a mucusy kind of a feel. So you kind of try to stay away from the things that kind of do that. And if I sleep with a fan, so at times if I sleep with a humidifier, it negates the fan, or the fan will knock it out. So sometimes I'll sleep without and just try to put a little humidifier in there, or just put maybe a little Vicks around my nose, and just try to open that and pour up. And otherwise, you got to do what you got to do. Just kind of stretch it out, do a couple exercises. But 9 times out of 10, I just try not to yell, try not to overuse it, try not to, you know, when my son yells for me, my wife, I try not to yell. And, hey, come here. What can I do for you?
Well, that was my next question. Then at like sporting events or concerts, you have to protect the voice a little bit, right?
Well, that was different. Those were my 20s when I could just do that all day and all night, and then go and broadcast the next day. And now we got a little older, you gotta be a little more gentle, a little easier.
So let's talk podcasts, sir. You got your toes dipped in a whole bunch of stuff.
It's gone up a notch severely.
Everything.
I will say this, and I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No.
I will say this. Podcasts are something that I've had my toes in since about 2008. Not a lot of people even knew what podcasts were when I started really getting into the ground floor of it, or at least starting to find out about it. what had happened was that I've always been a radio guy, and I started my career doing all sorts of different jobs, but I was doing overnight traffic, and I wanted to be more creative. So I even though I learned production at Columbia, I really taught myself on my own. I started a DJ drops business where I was just doing voiceover drops for DJs to use for their sets and all that stuff. And I just taught myself production. And I started setting up home studios even before anybody even had a home studio. And then my brother and I, when we were living together before I eventually moved in and got engaged and married my wife, my brother and I were living on the north side, like the Ukrainian village area. We had this apartment where we had, 2.5 bedrooms and one was like an office, and I completely studioed it out. And a buddy of mine who's now, he's actually used to work for iTunes and a couple other places. He's now doing TV stuff in DC as a digital guy. But he was always, trying to tell me about podcasts. We got to do the podcast. This is going to be the wave of the future. In 2008, we got the minute guys like Howard Stern and all these rich people, and when celebrities start doing it, you're going to see. And we started trying to work with this guy, Chet Kopic, who was a sports guy in town in Chicago.
Sure.
And I decided, he's like, Chet was talking to him and me, and Chet was like, "Are you the one that does all the audio stuff?" I go, "Yeah, making MP3s for me was easy." And he's all right. Then somehow it just became me and Chet. And I started doing podcasts for him. And we started doing 3 or 4 different kinds of podcasts. And he started bringing me people to do it. They would pay me to do it. And then I started just meeting with former athletes, former NFL and NBA players. These guys would all come to my rinky-dink apartment in the Ukrainian village and pump out podcasts. And then it's kind of been that way. And then my buddy, when I used to be on the Man Cow show back in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, my buddy Abe, who went out, he eventually got a job, and we all kind of left Man Cow, and he went off to get a job in Miami, and then the gig went away, like radio. He found himself back in Chicago at home. And I said, "Listen, dude, we should do a podcast. Let's just do the stuff that we want to do. And let's just try to send it out." And so we started doing a podcast at his house, because he was a production guy too. And lo and behold, he was sending it to Tim Sabian, who was Howard Stern's program director for Sirius XM for a long time. And we didn't really know he was doing it. I knew he was in touch with the guy, but I didn't realize that he was sending stuff out. And then, as it said, I was actually unemployed at the time. I was working for a media broadcast school, just doing a job I was not really into, and I knew it was coming to an end. I knew the job was closing in on me, and my buddy Abe called up and said, "I got some good news. I just got the phone with the guys at Sirius, and they're going to give us a 3-episode trial to be on the Stern Channel." We worked out a spot at the JBTV studios downtown Chicago, and an alternative rock station guy who used to have these awesome TV radio studios in downtown. And we set it up. The guys flew out. They set us up with an ISDN machine so we could broadcast. We knocked out 3 episodes, 3 days in a row, tryout. And then 6 months later, we got a call saying Howard loved it, and we want to sign you up for about a year. And it became a 3-year deal just off the strength of that podcast. So it's one of those things where we did that, and it just kind of kept on. And then afterwards, I kind of was dipping in and out of podcasts. And ever since then, I just started helping more. My wife started doing podcasts. I started helping and producing her stuff. I started doing intros for a lot of different people. And I just kind of always have been around podcasts and different ideas and things of that nature and helping different people out. And then it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm going to start to do my own podcast, because I was doing production for so long. And then I lost my gig doing production. And I was like, I kind of want to go back on the air. And everybody was saying, let's hear your latest stuff. And I only had like radio stuff from like the Stern stuff where I was, not even being myself. And I was like, all right, I got to do my own. So I started my own podcast. And then then my wife started doing a new one. And then when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden I became the guy with the home studio. And I started working for an agent. I started working for some ex-athletes and politicians, and all sorts of people started coming to me and asking if I can help them do it. And I designed this way of doing podcasts. And now I kind of made my own little small company doing it, just having people send me audio, and I completely produce it and do intros and things of that nature. It's like a monthly thing where people send me as much audio as they want. I'll produce it up like it's like a real radio station. So I've just kind of just increased and increased and increased. And now every day I'm making podcasts.
Yeah, like your own little empire there. That's awesome.
Well, like I said,
Now,
it's one of those things we're all working from home these days, and I have the I have the knowledge of doing it. I have the knowledge of setting people up, and I genuinely have fun doing it. I genuinely have fun helping people. I genuinely love having people come to me who've never done any kind of radio or broadcasting, and I coach them through it. I actually started working with the Illinois Media School for broadcasting for a little while. I was coaching and developing people's podcasts and students that were new to it. I came up with a pretty decent curriculum of how to, if people want to do it, they've never done radio or never done broadcasting. I have a pretty decent crash course for it that has helped everybody, and I've really gotten some good response from it. So when it kind of goes in that nature, it's been fun. I've had a good time.
Aside from helping others and doing, working with other podcasts, you still have the LevyCast.
The LevyCast,
which I absolutely love.
The Levy, I appreciate it. The LevyCast was actually a pet project because over the years, I've had so many different ideas of what I want a different podcast to be. I've had, maybe it should be a food podcast. I wanted to do a voiceover one where I was calling it, the voice ... over podcast, where I was going to just dump into voiceovers. And then before the Jordan documentary, I had the idea, and I still have an idea of doing a Jordan podcast of people's personal stories of it. And I've even recorded people's personal stories, and I'm still going to try that one day. But I kind of wanted to do this. Every podcast would be a different podcast. And then once again, the pandemic hit. And I was like, you know what? I just want to start. Maybe I'll just start kind of doing it it's therapeutic for me. So I kind of didn't want to do it like, I wanted to make them evergreen. I didn't want to make them too specific to a time. But again, the pandemic hit, and then Kobe Bryant died right before, so I did one for that. And then the Jordan podcast, then the Jordan documentaries came out, and I got, I've been a sports radio guy for so long that my buddies and I, we were in Chicago sports radio. We started kind of doing a podcast coinciding with it, and then I just kind of kept it going with my life. And I found a good sweet spot of whatever I kind of want to do, and I've developed a pretty decent following of people that are enjoying it. So I kind of wanted to make it a podcast where it gives little windows into my life. It kind of gives windows into the stories that I have and the 20 years of radio that I've been in, just the Super Bowls and the parties and the locker rooms and just different environments I've been in that radio has granted me. It's just kind of fun doing it. And then just my daily life with my wife's on the radio, and I just thought it'd be kind of a fun way to kind of get my content out there. And it's helped because now, like I said, when I audition for stuff and they say, what do you sound like? And I get some of the podcasts, like, that's great. So I've kind of developed a really cool little thing I got going here. And luckily I've had a lot of people noticing that I'm in this good pocket. And when people come up to me, I'm like, hey, here's how we can do it. Here's how I'll make your podcast work. And then if I like it, maybe I'll put you on my podcast. I mean, it's one of those things. And it helps also when you're coaching people's podcasts or when you're teaching people podcasts, it always helps to say, here's something I've found too, because I'm doing it also. I've never been a fan of going to coaches and going to people that are not doing what it is that I want to do. I never liked I don't do a podcast. I'm just kind of coaching people and helping. Well, in order to know what the latest trends are, the latest websites, the latest, how to record people and yada, 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 that's what you got to do.
Well, I love I listened to a lot of the LevyCast episodes. And I think it was the last one when you were talking about horror stories with athletes.
Yes, the locker room horror stories.
Yes. So I wanted to share one real quick. My horror story was I was on the field in Milwaukee and I was trying to interview Mike Cameron, the baseball player. And I went up to him and I said, "Hey, Mr. Cameron, do you have a couple minutes for a quick interview?" And he turns around and he goes, "No, that's not how you do it." And I had just started, so now I'm like freaking out. He calls me, he drags me into the dugout, and my nephew's recording this, and I'm freaking out because I don't know what's going on. And then he just basically just said, you really should ask me how I'm doing first. And he sets this whole thing, and it ended up being really funny.
Really?
And then a week later, I'm in Houston, and I see him in the on deck circle, and I kind of go up behind him, pregame. Not during the game because that'd be ridiculous. I go up behind him and I said, "Mr. Cameron, how are you today, sir?" And he turns around and he has this biggest grin and he goes, "Oh, you guys again." And then he gave us another interview. So that was my almost horror story, which turned into a good story.
It's interesting because I started doing a podcast with the next baseball player. His name is Bret Boone.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
He's a former athlete, former Major League All-Star, Silver Slugger, Golden Glover. He's a name.
Third
brother's
generation.
the manager of the Yankees, and his dad played, his grandpa played, his
Yeah.
son just got drafted by the Nationals. And I help him with his podcast. I co-host it with him. I produce it. I do a lot of stuff with it. And every podcast, it's his podcast. We interview his friend. His friends are all amazing former players, Hall of Famers, current coaches. And he always asks me, how did that go? How did that go? What did you think What did you think of this podcast? And he gets mad because I say I really liked it. And he goes, well, why do you like them all? And I said, just like you did, because you're getting these players on, and they are really, really dressed down with you. They are unguarded with you. And we had Mike Cameron on, and he was completely cool. We've had other players on that were completely cool. And he's like, well, what do you like about Cammy? Was cool. But we've had on other guys before that we've had on, and they were awesome. And then we go, what'd you think? I go, well, I'll be honest. When I met that guy in the locker room, he was a complete asshole. And right now, that guy treated me on this podcast like we were best friends in the locker room, and I was one of the guys. And I was like, so it's kind of funny when he's like, well, I go, this is different. It's different about the podcast. Not a lot of people understand that. People like you and me, I mean, I was never a beat writer. I reported in Chicago sports. I did for different radio stations, but a good chunk of my career was dedicated to getting athletes for a morning show to call in or come into the studio, and I would get paid per that. So my job really was a professional networker, so I can get these guys to call in or be on it. I would make $100 per athlete. So, I mean, over the years, I networked enough where there was a beat reporter who was off. Hey, do you mind if I get you a press pass for the Bulls game? Can you go string audio for, Metro Source or Westwood One? Can you go, give me three home players and whatever the coaches are and do that kind of stuff. So I did stuff that was like that, but a good chunk of it really was me networking, me trying to get people to come on the stations, and a little bit of everything. So when you deal with that, like you did, you deal with these personalities, and sometimes these athletes are pretty raw. Even the ones that are like, oh, he's the nicest guy in the world. Well, not this day.
Yeah.
Not to this reporter. And the ones I always got into it with were never like the good ones. I never got into probably the highest profile guy that I ever got into it with was Scottie Pippen.
Oh.
And he just cursed me out because he's just not a nice guy. Just not a nice guy. He just isn't. I mean, the story with him was that I had just got into the alternative radio station and working with a major morning show guy. And the Bulls had a media day, and I got told about an hour before, head to Deerfield to go get the Bulls media day. It was the year that Scottie Pippen signed back. And, I lived downtown. I didn't have a car. I had a borrowed car. Deerfield was like an hour away. By the time I got there, it was like, I was 20 minutes into it, and Pippen was just finishing up his press interview. And then, they go around and media people. We could just try to get guys, try not to get guys. I didn't really know the story, but I was still doing the right. And I just went up to him. And am I allowed to curse? Is it okay if I curse on this?
Sure. Yeah.
I already said asshole, so I kind of breached it, but sometimes you get away with that. But I went up to him. He was all by himself. I said, Mr. Pippen, I apologize. I just came into the end of your press conference. I just grabbed you a couple of minutes. He just let me know down. He goes, man, weren't you in there when I gave I answered all the questions? And he looked at me up and down. I was like, I never had that happen. And then all of a sudden, my buddy Stephen Bardo came over, and Ryan Baker from CBS and all these other guys came over like, yo, Scotty, can we get you real quick? And he's like, yo, what y'all need, brothers? And then he started talking to those guys, and I was like, fair enough. And then by the time I even got my mic out, there were so many people around, I got elbowed out of the spot. And I was like, all right. So I went and got like Jalen Rose and Kirk Heinrich and all these other people. And I would just and then years went by, and a couple of years went by, and then all of a sudden he was trying to become a media person on ESPN, and then he gave me all the interviews I wanted.
Nice.
And then with that year, and actually in that year, before that happened, that year was my first year. When he did that, was my first year really covering the Bulls as a working person. And I became really good friends with a lot of security guys. And I would always say, tell me about Jordan. Just tell me about the stories. Because I really wanted to know the stories.
Sure.
And I was never I never intruded. They really took to me because I was a kid who, I went to high school in Omaha, Nebraska, for crying out loud. I never saw a professional basketball player in my life. The most we had was like the CBA. And we had like Tim Legler, who would at the mall. And that was a huge thing. And here I am at the Bulls in the United Center, freaking out every day. And I would see, players. And I remember the one security guard, he goes, yo, come here. It was against the Sonics. That's how old this was. There was a team in Seattle called the Sonics.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, just so you know, the second quarter, the boss is coming. Well, who's the boss? MJ. He's going to be here in the second quarter. Watch this row. And I was all the way up in the press box, high up. And then sure enough, second quarter, I see everybody starting to go nuts. And I see MJ walk in. I'm like, oh my God. 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 And so at the end of the game, I rushed down there before the game just so I could see him. And sure enough, he walked. It was funny because as I walked down, the Sonics were walking down because they just like, I think they won that. Yeah, they won that game. And they were all just walking over. And then MJ walked past me and walked past them. Even the Sonics players like, yo, that was MJ. And then they were freaking out. And these are NBA players on their own right.
Well, he's Michael.
Exactly. And so I went in there and I guess he went and talked to the team. He did his own thing because Pippen was there. And at the end of the game, I went in there and Pippen was there and Eddie Curry and a bunch of other players were sitting in the locker room. And I was one of the last ones in there just hanging out, and MJ came out. And he sat in the locker room. It was me, maybe two other audio guys who were both just like me, who weren't Sirius B reporters. And he goes, and MJ sits down. He starts like holding court.
Wow.
He looks around. He's and Eddie Curry's like, whose locker am I sitting in? And just before he's about to start talking real trash to him, because I could see the look in his eye, he wanted to light him up. And all of a sudden, MJ looked at me, looked at me, and then he started staring right at me. And I felt this giant tap on my shoulder. And I look over and it's Scottie Pippen, and he goes, oh, you got to go, brother. and I had a Jordan hat on. I didn't even have the mic in. I sat there like a little kid, like almost like I went to a carnival and I had a giant balloon. A clown just popped it on me, and I was like, oh. And so they looked at me and they started laughing. I was like, but I got the hat. And MJ like kind of gave me the thumbs up, and I walked out, and then the other guys I was with, they were like, oh man, I'm sorry, you got my tape, we're not recording. This guy's like, I appreciate it. I'm like, I'm not giving you my tape. I had nothing in there. I wasn't even recording, but I was like, oh, whatever. Well, years later, I would meet Scotty, and he was trying to be Mr. Media Guy. So I was like, hey, can I grab you? He goes, yeah, man, what you need? All of a sudden, we're friends.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I've seen him in mixed, sometimes he's cool, sometimes he's not cool. Actually, his wife was the one I always got along with really well. So it was just kind of funny in that kind of vein. But other than Scottie Pippen, I'll go full circle with you, is that after him, nobody that I ever got into it with was ever like a big, important person. Kobe Bryant, awesome. Shaquille O'Neal, awesome. I mean, Michael Vick was awesome. Michael Jordan was okay. The times I met him, he was cool, but not, it was just kind of MJ. But in other words, all the other biggest athletes I've ever met, baseball players and A-Rod and Jeter and all these other major guys, Sosa, they were always cool with me. So it was always the guys that were like mid-level that were like not very nice. But Isaiah Thomas, one of the nicest guys I ever met. And you told me Lambeer was cool.
I honestly, Lambeer, every media session I've had several with him, through the WNBA. The guy's amazing. Now maybe the first time I talked to him, I mentioned the Land of the Lost, and then I also mentioned being from Chicago, and that got a laugh out of him. So maybe I kind of broke the ice. But I don't know. The guy is really cool. But it's weird. Like I've had great interviews with Lou Ferrigno. The rest of the time,
he was a guy I did not like. I did not like Lou Ferrigno.
That's my point. Like I've heard so many horror stories about Ferrigno. I've heard horror stories.
I got a Lou Ferrigno. I got two Lou Ferrigno stories for you.
You got time for one? I don't want to keep you forever, man.
No. The one time he came into the radio station, he already wasn't very nice. He was coming in to promote Comic-Con. And he just walked around like he wasn't like everybody else was like, hey man, can I grab a picture with you? He was like, yeah, $20. And like $20? Like you're at the radio station to promote that you're here and you want us to pay $20. You just used our platform to tell me about Comic-Con. So I ended up going to Comic-Con, and we were on Sirius. I was on the Stern channel, and I went there and I was like, hey man, I was wondering if I might be able to try to snag you for, a couple comments for the show. And he's like, hold on, I'm doing television. And some guy with a flip camera comes over and does an interview with them. I was like,
that might have been me.
I was like, a flip cam? Like that? I go, dude, I'm on the Stern channel. I was like, you're going to be seen right here by 3 viewers, or you can be heard by 10 million people. All right. About it.
That's hilarious. That really might have been me.
It might have been you. I don't care. But I was just like, okay. Whatever. You know what I mean? That's fine. I was like, I'll just go get Tia Carrere. I'll get someone else. I'll get William Shatner.
Not a bad substitute. Yeah, see, I have the same thing with, I don't know if you're familiar how much you're into wrestling, but Kevin Nash, the wrestler, I've had nothing but great experiences with him.
You know what? He was the guy I got along with him too, but I when I dealt with him, it was very like I said, when it comes to radio stuff, usually a guy like that is pretty cool. Kevin Nash is not nice to like regular people. But he knew radio people and he knew where I was coming from, and he was always very cool with it. So I always try to approach guys like, hey, my name is Dan Levy. I'm working with the Howard Stern channel. I'm working with the Man Cow Show. Let me just grab a couple minutes from you. And they've always been cool. But I've seen other people, like regular people, walk up to him and he's hand in the air, kind of, shut off. So I've seen both. I've seen a lot of sides to a lot of different people. And I take a lot of it with a grain of salt because, again, the minute I say I'm media, they automatically think I'm just going to go and look for something until I really say, look, I'm working for a radio station. I'm just trying to have a little fun. If you don't like it, I'll end it. No one ever gets to hear or see it. And they're usually, all right, man, what's up?
No, you're absolutely right. I don't take it personally. I've been turned down several times, but for the most part, I've had a lot of success and I'm successful with people. I'm happy about that. With your podcast, with all the stuff you got going on, and your wife's got actually now she has two
podcasts.
Two. Are you and your wife ever going to do a on-air project together? We
have actually. She's always, when are we going to do one with the areas? When can we jump on? And we've been wanting to do one. We are going to do it soon. I've been kind of in the process of, I don't know if you can see it. There's a rebuilding kind of with my little home studio here. Right now it's only really designed for one person, but I kind of wanted to do a video thing with her. And I didn't want to do one of those podcasts where we're husband and wife. Let's talk about our life. Okay. I'm always I'm so bored with those. I'm so bored with couples that are, hey, let's talk about our nephew. Let's talk about our son. Nobody gives a shit about that.
Well, you guys got so many other cool things going on.
We do, but my thing is, okay, well, what else can we do that would tie in? What else can I do that can feed? So I did come up with a pretty good idea. It's just a matter of doing it. But you know that show Hot Ones on First We Feast?
Yeah.
I was going to do an ode to that show. Kind of like I love that show, and I kind of want to do an ode to that show. And it was going to be kind of her and I will do it at some point when we can set it up right. We'll both be on a video camera. We're going to try the sauces, different ones. And we'll do I was going to pose it out to people online. Give us any question you want. Would you rathers? And we would just do it live. And just take these hot sauces and ask each other questions, see if anybody's got any live. Her and I aren't afraid to ask any question, answer any questions.
Oh, yeah.
Throw at us. So for me, that's more cooler. And if there's something there, like in my ode to the Hot Ones people, I'll try their sauces and we can kind of judge it and just kind of, that was kind of my idea with it. Is do something live, let anybody ask whatever they want, and let's just see how far it goes, kind of deal.
Well, I'm all for that, man. I'm in on that. If you do that, I will be one of your first listeners, man. Because
started thinking of questions because there's all those things where I'm like, I'll pose it. I wanted to do it during the Christmas break, but then things got hectic around here, and it is what it was. And I got more equipment that I came in, and I'm trying to still set up the studio where we can kind of see each other. But then I set up a little front room desk area where I'm going to put another computer over there. That's where she might be able to do it from, and then maybe we'll be able to see each other because I don't have 2 cameras in here. It'd be weird if she's on one camera, I'm on this camera, and we're right next to each other. There's all such an echo, so it's just a matter of me trying to get it just right. But I think I'm in the process of it, and then I just got to get the hot sauces.
Well, I look forward to that. Before I let you go, it's your turn now to promote whatever you want, promote any of your podcasts, promote them all, tell people where they can find everything.
All right. Well, I'm on Facebook, Bass On Air, BASS On Air, and that is the same for Instagram and Twitter. I'm starting my own little podcasting, so if you or somebody you know wants to do podcasts, even if you're a professional broadcaster, you don't have the time to edit it or produce it or give it a cool intro, reach out to me. And if you've never done radio, if you've never broadcasted before, but you want to do a podcast, I can help you do it. I can coach you through it, and I can help anybody do it. My 6-year-old's even doing a podcast because I'm that good at it. So if you want to go ahead and get a hold of me, You can get me on either Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or you can email me, Dan Levy, DANLEVY, on air at gmail.com. My podcast is LevyCast. You can find it on all podcast platforms. You can even ask your smart speaker to play LevyCast with Dan Levy. I also am on the Bret Boone podcast, and my wife is Jill Urchak. You can find all of her podcasts too, and that's where I kind of lay. But I mean, I'm a voiceover guy. I'm a radio guy. So whatever else is out there that people may need from me, I'm at your service.
Well, you are a radio personality extraordinaire, as I said, and I sincerely appreciate your time, man. This was a lot of fun for me.
Hey, man, I've been looking forward to this. I was always like, man, he asked my wife, and he won't ask me.
Well, I originally asked Jill because her paranormal podcast just completely blows my mind. I love that. And then I thought, man, I was kind of nervous about asking you because I didn't want you to think that I was just asking you just to ask you. But now when I'm doing another blog on Global Traveler, another story on Global Traveler about more podcasts, because the first one, now I was going to mention it, the story I did for Global Traveler on Jill's podcast and the others got the third highest views last year. So
Wow.
Now you're in competition. You can see if you could beat her number. I forgot.
I was like, I'm always competing with her. You know what's funny about her? She is definitely the famous one. So I'll be at a place and, I was going to get my car done. What do you do? I do radio and blah, blah, blah. You sound like we know you. And I was like, oh, my wife does radio too. And like, who's your wife? And Jill Urchak. They go, oh, we love Jill. I just throw $10 off. How's that sound? I'm like, awesome.
Hey, that's a great deal.
Done.
Right. Exactly.
Done.
Dan, thank you very much for your time, man. Have a good evening. Give my best to your lovely bride, and I will let you know when all this runs, and we'll keep tabs and see if you can catch your wife's views total.
Sounds like a plan, John. I appreciate it, man. I had fun with you.
Thanks, man. We'll talk to you later, buddy. Thanks.
You be well. Take care.
You too.
Later.